I am Johnny Pearson, and for some of you guys, you're kind of like, who's that guy? And I am on staff here at Believers Fellowship. I've been here for just over 7 years, and we usually have two teaching pastors, right? We have Matt, who's a little bit younger and tucks his shirt in. We have Gary, who's a little bit older but untucks his shirt. So I'm the kind of the typical guy. I'm the younger guy that untucks his shirt. And when I learned I was speaking, I had hurriedly tried to grow a goatee so that you would know automatically I was a youth pastor. But I think those days are past. Usually the youth pastors usually have some kind of facial hair, right? It's probably a beard more often these days. But I've been a youth pastor for over 10 years now, whether part-time as an intern, even full-time here at Believers for the past 7.5 years or so. And we love it. My wife and I love it here. We were called here from Chicago, and we were having the time of our life. We love Believers Fellowship, what we're doing on Sunday mornings. We love coming here and being refreshed, but we actually love what goes on throughout the week through home groups or through youth groups and through meeting in homes for dinner with mentors or parents. We absolutely love that part. But as a youth pastor, and I would say this happens a lot, as a youth pastor, I get most encouraged in my job when I see people take steps of growth in their faith, right? And probably to a lesser degree when you, that's why youth pastors are the best jobs. Like maybe a senior pastor might see that occasionally, but youth pastors see that all the time. And so I love working with students, working with families, because it's hard at times. It's really hard when you run to the mess and you have people losing jobs and you have people going through divorce and you have students struggling with depression or addiction, and it's really hard. So in order to keep my head up and be encouraged more often, whenever I'm having one of those bad days, what I like to do is I like to look into my joy folder. And I have a folder full of joy, and what's in here, and I keep it in my just right next to my desk. And if I'm ever having a rough day, I actually open this up and take a look through a couple of them. I have in here everything from pictures that my kids have drawn me, right? This little cute picture. I have past notes and cards from like Valentine's Day that my wife has made me. I have other things that I really cherish in here are notes of encouragement from past students or parents. And sometimes I read those and it's like, hey, Johnny, you have no idea how big of a difference you've made in my life. You were part of what God did in my life, and I really appreciate that. And I can just thumb through here and read. You can see, dozens and dozens of letters that I keep and I cherish because I need that. Because I need to see that what I'm doing is making a difference. I love it when I see students making choices that reflect their faith in God. And it's kind of hard to see sometimes. I tell people a lot that student ministries, doing ministry with students is sometimes the hardest soil to work with, but it yields the sweetest fruit. And it's awesome. One of the most recent letters I got actually from a student just this past week, from a student that I hadn't seen in over 10 years when I was a youth pastor in Idaho. And he wrote me, and I think that he put it on his heart. God put it on his heart to write me a note of encouragement simply because he's doing ministry right now. He's working as a middle school teacher in Montana, and he does Young Life over there. And so he's probably thinking like, these kids are terrible. Was I like that? I need to email my intern that I had, right? So he sent me an email, and he hits it on the head. He says something like, working with inconsistent, self-centered, insecure teenagers is very difficult. And some days I wonder why we still do it. But as you know, all the frustration is totally worth it. And he goes on to say, you helped push me to speak in front of others, to share my faith, to put up with my inconsistent attendance, my lackadaisical effort to make a difference for Jesus Christ in my high school, and you never quit on me. You pursued me much like I pursue these awesome young men. You led worship with me, even when I couldn't keep up with the chord changes or even sing remotely on key. This message fails in comparison to the type of thanks and gratitude you deserve, but I hope it brightens your day and at least encourages you. Thank you for believing in me, for pursuing me, and for demonstrating what a passionate man of God looks like, speaks like, sings like, and loves like. And I read it and I was like, that's really cool. That's cool that he could think back and remember kind of the inconsistency of young Christians, right? The inconsistency as we grow in our faith and start thinking back, like, how have I grown in my faith? And he goes on to tell me what he's been up to these past 6 years. He said, I've had the incredible opportunity to lead worship in front of thousands of screaming high school students and had the honor to share the gospel with hundreds upon hundreds of students who are far from God. I've been able to pray with students to accept the Lord as their Savior, taken students on ski trips, work trips, backpack trips, camp trips. I've led a weekly devotional group of 12 young men for the past 3 years. I've been able to disciple them and share my life with them. I tell you all this because I believe with all my heart that this is fruit to your account. And talk to me about that's encouragement, right? And I need to, come in with humility and say, you know what? I need to take the attitude of Paul, where he planted a seed and maybe he watered a seed, but he didn't do any of the growth. God caused the growth. And that's exactly what I see in this guy right here, that he could make these poor choices in high school. I remember sitting over coffee with him talking about his relationship issues and his struggles with popularity. And it's tough in our culture to actually grow in your faith. And when you see people making choices that reflect their faith in God, it's really encouraging, is it not? And in our study of Abraham, we are looking at a guy who really is a lot closer to us than we want to admit, right? When we first met Abram, he was called by God to leave his city, leave his homeland, leave his everything, and go until God says stop. And so Abram's like, oh, wow, I just got called by God. I got to do this. So he packs up, and then he goes a little ways, and then he stops, and then he waits a little bit, and then he goes a little further, and he stops, and he finally gets to the promised land that God tells him to stop. This is it. And Abram looks around and is like, oh, this is it. And then there's a famine in the land, and he starts to doubt, and he loses trust. And then what does he do? He goes to Egypt, because there's always food in Egypt. It's weird how that happens. So he goes to Egypt, and what does he do in Egypt? Well, he fails hard, just like we always fall hard, right? He's a lot closer to us than we want to admit, because what he does in Egypt is he's like, oh, I'm scared God's not going to take care of us, and my wife is beautiful at 75, right? So that's awesome for him. He's got a lot going for him. But so he says, oh, my wife's so beautiful, they're going to want to kill me, and I got it. I know. I'll just give her to the Pharaoh to be a wife, to be his wife. That makes sense. And he accepts the dowry, right? He accepts the goods and the animals and all these things. And then he's just kind of crooked at times. He's like, really, Abram? You thought that was a good idea. You thought that was a good idea. And I'm human. Okay, pass. But he eventually goes back to the promised land. And he eventually goes back to where God called him. And remember a couple weeks ago, he and his nephew Lot separated ways because they were wealthy. They had too many animals, and they were eating up the grazed land, so they separated ways. And then in Genesis 14, we actually see Abram start to make choices that reflect his relationship with God. We see the most spiritual growth in Abram in chapter 14 than we have since we've met him, since he was originally called out of his hometown. So turn to Genesis 14. Genesis 14 is where we're going to be. We're going to pick up where Gary left off last week. So we're in Genesis chapter 14. And for those of you that missed last week, shame on you. I'm just kidding, sort of. But Gary did a great job recapping. He did a great job recapping really what is like kind of a dry historical era. It's really hard to preach on those topics. Like, okay, here's these kings that came and fought these other kings. Go with the Lord. But he did a great job wrapping it all up and showing how Abram going to rescue his nephew Lot, because this is what happened. These 5 kings come down and sweep through the corridor and conquering city-state after city-state, taking spoils, taking prisoners, until they finally get to this rebellious group of kings. And he takes them out. This boss king takes all of them out. And the king of Sodom and king of Gomorrah and all the other allied kings, they get taken out along with, guess who? Abraham's nephew, Lot, who was living in the vicinity of Sodom. And so he gets all taken out, get taken back up. They're like prisoners of war, literally. Women and children and wounded men are walking up and being taken back to captive. But Abram gets wind of it, and he goes and he rescues. He rescues his nephew Lot, but he ends up doing more than that. He rescues all of those people, right? He rescues all of those people, women and children, and he gets all the spoils back that were plundered. And what we just like recapped in like 2 minutes, and what we're about to read in like 1 second, took probably weeks Think about this week-long, this month-long campaign of conquering cities, and then this Abram hearing wind of it, and then taking a week-long journey to go and rescue. It was over 100 miles on foot with 300 and some men. And then he had to fight a battle, and then he won the battle. And now he has his little army mustered with 300-something men, and then he has a bunch of women and children and hurt men who were hurt in battle, probably, maybe some healthy. And now he's got to make his way slowly back down, right? What we read in seconds, we always need to slow down when we read the Bible. I always tell the students this, hey, let's just slow down and picture actually how long that would take and the grueling journey of, okay, we have all of these supplies, and we have these wagons being pulled, and we have women and children, and the children will not. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? No! We're walking. Just follow, right? But you got to think of the glory of it too, where you have Abram leading this procession back down to all these city-states that were conquered before, and you can imagine these people coming out on the road. It's like a parade almost. Okay? Abram's leading this parade of victory coming down, and all of a sudden people are coming out and yeah, Abram, and he's throwing candy to the kids, and they're grabbing it, yeah, right? It's this parade of victory. And he's coming down this area here, going back home, and he gets to this little valley of the kings, and a couple people come out to greet him. So he was a rescuer, he was the man of the hour. Everybody's like, wow, we got something for your joy folder, Abram. Come here, I got a note of encouragement. Way to go. And all throughout, and these two kings come out in this valley of the kings. And that's where we pick it up in verse 17. So verse 17 of chapter 14, you guys there? Can I get an amen with you there? Okay, good. Then, after his return from the defeat of Boss King, and the kings who were with him. By the way, Gary did a great job last week pronouncing all those names. He just rattled through them. And what he learned to do was he learned that if you say a name with confidence, everybody will think, oh, that's how you always pronounce that. I forget how he said it. He said it like Charlemagne. How do you? Curlamander? No, what is it really though? Charlemander. Okay. Whatever. Boss King. Verse 17, then after his return from the defeat of Boss King and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Shavah, that is the king's valley. And also Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, and now he was a priest of God Most High. So these two kings come out to meet Abram, both with two varying worldviews. And the king of Sodom has an offer for Abram, the man of the hour. And he kind of has this awesome offer that Abram has to make a choice about. And skip down to verse 21. This is what the king of Sodom has to say to Abram. Verse 21, the king of Sodom said to Abram, give the people to me and take the goods for yourself. So here's this fallen king of battle, right, who lost all of his people, all of his goods. Way to go, king. And now he sees this victor coming, and he says, okay, I'm a pretty powerful king. This kind of startup guy, Abram, he might be good to have on my side. Let me make him a deal. Let me make him an offer. And let me just ask him, hey, Abram, you did awesome, by the way. Way to go. You did what I could not do. You're a good man that a king could use. You're the kind of guy that I'd like to get my hands on. Here's the deal. Why don't you keep all of the goods, all the spoils of this war, and just give me the people back? What do you need with people, right? Just give me the people. We'll go back to Sodom. We'll regain. We'll pull ourselves up, right? Because we're from Sodom. We live for pleasure. We live for glory. We live for ourselves. Our economy is bustling, and still, even after a war, this is where you have opportunities coming out of a depression like this to really start up a business and just. So why don't you give the people back? You keep all the goods. But Abram knows what's going on. Abram kind of sees through this subtle temptation, doesn't he? And he says, in the next couple verses, we'll just read it. I won't tell you. Let's read it. So you give me the people and take the goods for yourself. Verse 22, Abram said to the king of Sodom, no, I have sworn to the Lord, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread or a sandal thong or anything that is yours, for fear you would say, I have made Abram rich. I'll take nothing except what the young men have eaten and the share of the men who went with me, Aner Eshcol, and Mamre. It's like Favre, right? Brett Favre? Marm. We'll just go with Marm. Aner, Eshcol, and Marm. Let them take their share. So here we have Abram able to discern the king of Sodom's heart, able to understand what Sodom stands for, right? He's aware of their culture. I mean, Lot went there and he's like, oh, Lot, beware of Sodom, right? He's probably thinking like, oh, okay, go there, but look out. That culture lives for glory of themselves. It lives for pleasure. It looks out for number one first. They're greedy. They're all about getting things. Culture kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? But Abram's able to discern the temptation and start to trust God. And look at that statement of faith. No, I have taken an oath. I have made a public commitment to not take anything from you because I don't want people to say that you have made me rich. I don't want you to say that you have made me rich. I want to be able to say, no, I trust God and God alone for everything. Abram's growing in his faith. Because 2 chapters ago, when the Pharaoh of Egypt said, oh, I'll take the wife and here's the dowry. And then he sends his wife back to Abram saying, how come you didn't tell me you're married? I'm having these terrible dreams. Abram could have said, oh, thank you for my wife back. I'm sorry. Here, take the goods back. I don't deserve those. You're right. Those are yours, by the way. I'll take the wife and we'll just go back home. Thanks. He doesn't do that. He says, oh, here's my wife back. Great. We'll go and we'll keep everything. Right? That's like a jerk move to do, isn't it? But here you see the same situation. Well, not the same situation. A similar situation where he could have kept the goods. Rightfully, he won them in battle. But he chose to say, no, I'm going to trust God, and I'm not going to give in to your cultural view of things. And can we say the same thing? Are we growing in our faith to where you can look back in your life and say, oh yeah, when I was a younger Christian, I did some things that I probably would not do today? Or are you going to say, no, I'll probably make the same decision? When I first became a Christian when I was younger, I remember like in late middle school, I had an opportunity. I went to the fair, and the fair is great in Eastern Washington, and what we do at the fair is probably a little different here. You guys go on rides and eat food. We look at the sheep pens and the pig pens, and we measure them out. We're like, oh, blue ribbon there. That sow's looking good. So I was there. All my friends had pigs or sheep in the fair, because that's what you do back then. You actually present and you sell, and you're walking your pig with your stick. But I found $20 in one of the stalls. There was a $20 bill. We were looking at pigs and like, dude, $20 bill. I'm a Christian. So what do? I pocket it and I say, hey, God provides. Isn't that terrible how I justify it? Like, whoa, God is looking out for me. He knows that my family's not as well off as these other families, and the $20 is a godsend. When everyone knows you should always turn it into whoever the barn master or whoever is in charge of barns. You should turn it in and say, hey, I found this $20. Somebody's probably missing it. They'll probably come looking for it. Here you go. And then some little kid will come and say, did anybody turn a $20 bill in? And then here it is. That would have been a great story. But no, I pocket it and I moved on. I would hopefully not make the same decision as a young Christian as I would as a more mature Christian. Hopefully I'm growing in my faith. I had a similar opportunity when I was in Bible college with only bigger at stake. More things were at stake, I should say. And similar to Matt, I worked at a restaurant and kind of put us through Bible college. My restaurant was much nicer than Matt's, though. Seriously, much nicer. And so I worked at a restaurant, and I was a waiter, and it was a really nice restaurant, and we had a lot of conventions in Chicago, and a lot of people would come in with, like, the boss would come in with his coworkers, and he would pick up the check, so the coworkers would order the most expensive thing on the item menu, and, a couple bottles of wine, whatever, and at the end, if any good waiter would do this, they see a table full of 6 or more, what do? They add gratuity, right? So they add the 18% because it's a guaranteed tip. I've been burned before. I was that kind of guy that was like, oh, no, I'll just leave it to them and I want to trust in the service. They're going to leave a good tip. And then it's a terrible tip. I'm like, what? So I always add gratuity. 6 or more, I add gratuity. So there's big tables coming through this restaurant all the time. And kind of the culture of it would be, I would always look at the check, I would add the 18%, I would circle it, and then I would give it to the host and be like, hey, just so you know, I added gratuity, have a great day, And they would tip and everything. And then my coworkers saw this, and they're like, Johnny, what are you doing? You're leaving so much money on the table. What you got to do is you got to add the gratuity and then hand it to them and walk away. Because 50% of the time, no joke, 50% of the time, the host would take it, two glasses of wine in, he'd look at the thing, leave a tip, sign it, and send it away. And so you get double tipped, double gratuity. So an $80 tip on a $400 meal would end up being a $160 tip, right? It's hard to refuse that. And everybody did it. They're like, Johnny, what are you doing? You're leaving so much money out there. And I'm like, oh, you're right. No, I wasn't like, oh, you're right. And I didn't start doing it. I stood my ground. I was like, you know what? That's all right. I'm just going to do my thing and be honorable. It's not a good reputation for the restaurant. And they know I'm a Bible college student. It even happened one time on accident where I didn't circle it and I just handed it to them because I was in a hurry at other tables. And I came back and it was double tipped. And I was like, oh, it happened. It's $200 for a poor Bible college student. Should have only been $80. It's a nice restaurant. What do I do? Younger Johnny would have been like, walked away. But I had to do the right thing. Because first of all, I told my coworkers, no, I'm not going to do that. I made an oath to them. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I had to go back and be like, excuse me, sir, I added gratuity and you tipped on it. You might want to just initial here and do your thing. And I was kicking myself because it was a lot of money. But because I made that oath, I'm being held accountable by my coworkers who are not even Christians. Abram made this oath, right? He said, no, King of Sodom, I committed to my God. I made a vow to my God that I'm not going to accept anything from you because I'm going to trust God to provide. Abram was able to discern the temptation and get over that because he made an oath to God. He made a commitment to God. He's starting to grow in his faith. Now, why was he so strong in this time and able to do that? Well, I believe it's 2 verses before this where outside of Salem, remember 2 kings came to him. One, the king of Sodom, the other, the king of Salem. He chose Salem over Sodom in this situation because outside of this town, he was led in a church service. He came through, and he's the man of the hour. He came through, and the king of Salem, his name is Melchizedek, he encouraged Abram in the faith. Look at who Melchizedek. Look at what Melchizedek does. So verse 18. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. Now he was a priest of God Most High. He blessed him and said, blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. Now Abram, we're getting to know a little bit, right? We're seeing the kind of progression of his faith and how God is going to build a nation on him and eventually send the Messiah through him. Sodom, the king of Sodom, we're kind of familiar with. We've dealt with him a little bit here. He's shown up before. We're going to deal with him later as well. But Melchizedek is a total new character. We have no idea who this guy is. And actually, Melchizedek is a guy in Scripture that has made theologians scratch their head for a long, long time, thousands of years. Martin Luther had his theories on who he was. John Calvin had his theories. Augustine had his theories. Even like modern-day theologians, Gary Albert has his theories. But here's the deal. Melchizedek, what we know of him, let's just pause and get to know a little bit about him. Here's what we know, okay? His name, Melchizedek, means king of righteousness. Okay? Whether that's a title or his actual name. His parents had high aspirations for him. It's probably a title. I'm going to name my king president, or my child's name president. High expectations. But his name is Melchizedek, which means king of righteousness. Probably a title. And he was a king of a city named Salem. Salem is translated peace. So here we have the king of righteousness and the king of peace. Kind of a cool dual thing. And what else do we know of him? Well, here it tells us that he is a priest. His role, he was not only a king, but he was also a priest. And priests are kind of intercessors for the people and God, between people and God. So here's this guy who stands between the people and the God Most High. And he offers sacrifices on behalf of the people, and he prays for the people to God Most High. He stands in between them, right? Interesting. So here's Melchizedek. He's the king of peace, the king of righteousness. He's a priest. The Bible mentions him 2 other times. One in in Psalm 110, David recognizes him as a type of Messiah, where he is going to be the Messiah, the coming Messiah is going to be a priest in the line of Melchizedek, not in the line of Abraham and Levi, eventually. So it's interesting that this Melchizedek guy, and in the New Testament, talks about how much greater this priesthood is than the Aaronic priesthood that Levi comes from. So here we have this guy who was a priest, who was a king, who actually knew God. Now, let's just pause for a second and think. Here's a guy in the Old Testament that knew intimately the Creator, God Most High. That didn't hit you the same way it hit me. Here's a guy, before Abraham and Judaism and the nations were blessing people and saying, you should know this guy, before the Bible was written. Here's a guy that was called out by God Most High to be a priest for him. Okay, still nothing. Okay, here's a guy. Okay, think about how big our God is. Think about how mighty he is. And are we really the only Christians in the world? Well, of course not. The world is much flatter now than it was back then. So we know there are Christians all across the world on Sunday morning coming together through the internet. We know this, history. All across the world, our God is so big. Think about how many Christians today are worshiping Jesus. From every tongue, from every nation, praising him. God did that back then. He called out people back then. Think of Job, who was said to live before Abram. Job knew God Most High intimately. He had a personal encounter with him after losing everything. Remember the end of the book of Job, where he's down on his knees and God is there, and he's like, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? And Job's like, okay, you got me. And eventually Job would get his wealth back and get his family back. But he'll never forget that moment where he actually knew intimately and God spoke to him. God did that before the Bible. And here's Melchizedek, who comes onto the scene. He knows intimately who God is. And you think about this scene where, okay, again, we read in 2 verses what probably was a longer conversation. You think about Abram coming down and the king of Salem coming out, and king of Salem says, hey, Abram, way to go. The God Most High blesses you. And Abram's like, did you say the God Most High? Like, I'm a monotheist. I don't know if you know what that means, Mr. Polytheism, but I believe in one God, the God creator of heaven and earth. And then the king of Salem could be like, yep, me too. And Abram's like, really? And imagine the conversation they had, able to encourage each other once they realized they were on the same page and the same team. And Melchizedek was able to bless him. And Abraham felt so highly of Melchizedek as a priest of the God Most High that he even tithed to him. It's kind of a big deal. And this idea that one Christian could bless another Christian and one Christian can encourage another Christian is real today. You guys ever had a bad day? Okay, yeah, you've had a bad day. Let me rephrase that. You guys ever wearing a really bad day? Like people understand, like people like give you a radius when you walk through the store? Like, ooh, he looks really upset. Don't look, honey. your kids going the other way. Well, imagine you're having a really bad day at a grocery store, at school, or at work, and somebody, complete stranger, comes up and says, hey, are you all right? And you look at them and you're like, no, not really. Do you want to talk about it? Well, you're a stranger. But then you kind of the wheels start turning, you kind of look at them and are like, are you a Christian? And you can tell. And they're like, yeah, I am a Christian. Oh, where do you go to church? Oh, I go down the street. Oh, me too. I was right down the street. There's so many churches in Gig Harbor right around the corner. Who knew? We've never even seen each other. But you worship the same God as me. And you can pray for me. And you can encourage me. Even though we've never met, we worship the same God. There's a connectivity. There's an encouragement there. This is Abram and Melchizedek right here. It's awesome when you meet other Christians, other God followers, and they encourage you. And here's what it does. When When we have an opportunity to leave a meeting with being encouraged, being blessed, feeling really close to God, it will help us make better choices that reflect our faith. But there will still be a subtle temptation. Even after spiritual victories, there's always that temptation that comes in. I see it all the time with student ministries. After a mission trip or after a winter retreat, Mount Baker's coming up December 5 through 7, $159 early bird fee is due today. But Mount Baker, so after these big spiritual victories, I talk to kids a week later and say, hi, how you doing? You really opened up and you talked about needing accountability and you talked about this or that and you were really doing great at this trip. And then they were like, yeah, I was, until I got home and I got in a big fight with my mom and she grounded me. And then I got to my room and I was alone, and then I started, the internet and whatever, and I fell hard. There was temptations layered throughout there right after that spiritual victory. And we need the encouragement of others to help us out. We need to be able to say, I commit publicly. I make an oath. I renew this vow that I have. And in closing, what I try to do, and maybe you're feeling that you need to renew a vow. Maybe if you're married, you need to renew your husband vows and say, I need to recommit to the vows that I made publicly. I need to recommit to my wife to be there for her. Maybe you need to recommit, and even like Job 31:1 says, I've made a covenant with my eyes that I might not look lustfully at a woman. Maybe that's where you are, or with your kids even. Maybe you need to just make a public vow to your friends around you and say, hey, I'm committed to my family. I need to be there. I work a lot of hours, so my family time is precious. So when I get invited to a game night, I can then say no, and they'll know why. My friends will not be like, oh, come on, man, come out and play. No. I made a vow that I'm going to be there for my kids, and I'm going to raise them and be the spiritual leader in this house. Maybe you need to make that public vow so that others around you can be like holding you accountable. It's almost like a politician. They're the best at this, right? They're best at making public vows, right? I commit to this or that or this, and then it's on record. And when they don't do that, people are like throwing arrows, shooting arrows at them. And they're like, whoa, you said you do this, this, and this. How come you're not doing it? But Christians, we tend to make private vows, don't we? We tend to be like, in my heart, oh, I'm not going to do that again. Oh, I'm going to go home and I'm going to roll around on the floor with my kids. I'm not going to go to my bedroom and read. I had a long day, but I still need to. We do private vows that nobody can hold us accountable for. But we need to make public vows and private vows. We need to do both. Both are good. Not only do we need to make more public vows as Abram did, that's how he was able to stand. Because if he were to say in his heart, I'm not going to do this, and then go do the same thing, nobody would know. But because he said, I have made a vow, an oath to my God that I will not accept anything. And then if he were to accept something, people around him would be like, what's all that 1 in a million talk? Right? What's all that talk back there about the vow and you're never going to do that? You just did that. The second thing that I want to do is I want to start being an encouragement to others. And I want to start praying more with people. Melchizedek, Abram was able to resist the temptation and start growing in his faith when he was reconnected with another God follower, right? When he was reconnected back into church. I want to do that. I want to reconnect. I want to stay connected. I want to be both encouraged and be encouraged. I want to be encouraged and be encouraging to those around me. But it's not just a vertical thing, or it's not just a horizontal thing. It's not between people and people. It needs to be between us and God. It has to be. Notice that Abram left Melchizedek, the king of righteousness, the king of peace, his priest, his intercessory between him and God. He left him being encouraged and able to stand in temptation. We are offered the same exact opportunity. We have a king of peace. We have a king of righteousness. We have a high priest in the order of Melchizedek, willing to stand for us and encourage us. And notice he brought bread and wine. Gary took my thunder last week. Melchizedek offered bread and wine to Abraham. Jesus does the same, but more so. Because the body and the cup that Jesus offers is his body and blood. The bread represents his body. The cup represents his blood. And when we come to this table, we are able to recommit to him. We're able to be refreshed by him. We're able to renew privately our vows, and we're able to be prayed for even. I'll be over here. Gary will be over here. We will bless you. We will pray for you. We will lift up. We will intercede on your behalf. And you can leave today. All of us could leave today being encouraged and ready to stand when temptation comes. Because we are so tempted by Sodom. We are so tempted by our culture to keep up with them. To make more, to have more. Are we content with what God has given us? Are we willing to stand under temptation and be a witness to the world around us? I want you to make that vow today. When you come to the table, I want you to, in your heart, make that vow and then tell somebody about it. Tell somebody, where do you need to recommit your life to? Is it purity? Is it contentment? Is it witnessing to your friends and coworkers? Is it being a better husband, a better father, a better wife, better mother? Tell somebody. Make a vow today. Let me pray, and then we'll respond. Father, thank you for this example of Abram and how we have an opportunity to see how he is growing in his faith. Lord, you are so patient with him. You are so encouraging to him to have Melchizedek represent you and push him to greater things. Lord, you're patient with us. You're encouraging to us where you have sent the King of Peace and the King of Righteousness to be an encouragement to us in our time of need. Help us to stand under temptation today and this week. Help us to represent you and make choices that honor our relationship with you. Thank you for this. In Jesus' name, amen.